Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's coring. This coring is on conducting the implementation meeting. This is the why, the how, and the what of the implementation meeting, why it's important, how to do it, and what it will yield for you and the rest of your implementation in the practice. So why is this step vital to your success? I want to let you know I purposely didn't animate this slide because I wanted you to sort of be bombarded with a lot of information on this first slide, because it is so important. This is where you're going to meet with all the key players in the practice, or most of the key players, I should say, in the practice. And this is the first step to getting the staff on board with the wellness program. For some of the staff members, it might be their first introduction to what's going on. But if you've been doing a consulting process, through the 15-minute appointment and the proposal meeting, and sometimes the implementation meeting comes after a couple proposal meetings. So you should be building rapport with the staff. So hopefully they're on board with you being there. Now there's their questions on why are you here are going to get a little more solidified and answered. It's also important because we're going to cover all the questions and concerns that they have, including the health professional, before they become obstacles. It's 100% okay for staff to have questions and concerns about what's going on, the changes in their practice. We want to be confident and efficient in explaining or answering their questions directly, in explaining what the health professional wants for their practice, and we are merely here to facilitate that. And that's important. It's not our nutraMetrix wellness program. It's the doctor or the health professional's wellness program. Sometimes I've had some health professionals introduce me as the person they've hired to do this, just to build that kind of edification with the staff. It's only happened once or twice, and it really doesn't matter, in my personal opinion. We just want to make sure that we're edified correctly by the health professional when we have this meeting, and certainly when we're going to go train the rest of the staff in subsequent trainings, if there is a rest of the staff. This is where we're going to gather any information that hasn't been decided yet, like staff incentives, or to confirm what has already been decided. Now, financial conversations like staff incentives need to be done in private with just you, the consultant, and the health professional or whoever is the financial decision maker. Sometimes the office manager or the key point of contact might be included in that. That's completely up to them, not you. I want to encourage you to always invite or ask the health professional to invite anyone who should be a part of this conversation. In my experience, most of the time, it's usually just been with the decision maker of the practice, but there have been a few times where the office manager has been a part of the entire process, and they're also a part of this conversation. Again, every implementation is customized, including the implementation strategy meeting. Why this is also important is this is often the turning point where we are no longer seen as a vendor or a rep. And this is where, in the health professional's mind, we become a consultant to them, or in some cases, a partner in their business. Notice I didn't say business partner, because I don't mean a nutraMetrix or Market America business partner, and I don't mean that we're going to sign some legal agreement with them to actually be a part of their business. I said a partner in their business. And without this step, implementation can be very, very, very difficult. Before we knew that this was a step in the process, implementation was hard and before we had the staff 1, 2, 3 training, I'm going to be honest with you guys, implementation was almost impossible unless you just had the right fit. If it's not the right fit, this is getting everyone into the right fit, into the groove. So how to do it? First of all, I think some of these are self-explanatory, but if they're not, I want to make sure that we cover them. Arrive early, dress professionally. If you are somebody who wears perfume or cologne, check yourself. That can be a big turnoff for someone. And even if you smell nice to the health professional one-on-one, you might get some quote-unquote enemies in the practice based on that. Trust me. Little things like that are important. So make sure that you are as neutral as possible, I guess, is the best way to say that. I hate this phrase in this case, but you're pleasing the majority of people most of the time when it comes to whatever you choose to douse yourself in or not to douse yourself in. Introduce yourself to the staff while you're waiting. You'll usually be kept waiting. And don't be afraid to take notes on the staff. Don't be afraid to pick up a business card at any stage in this process and, write down. You introduce yourself to whoever it is, and you barely, their name almost goes in one ear and out the other because you have a lot on your mind. Don't be afraid to go, okay, Linda, brown curly hair, and put it in whatever you're taking notes in. Linda, staff, or MA, or whatever she might be, or he might be. Don't be afraid to do that for yourself. While you're waiting, this might be a really good time to walk the clinic. You're sort of killing two birds with one stone, if you will, especially if you know that you're going to be kept waiting. Oh, the doctor is about 20 minutes behind schedule. Great, let's turn that into a positive. Great, you've built rapport with the office. You say, what I'd like to do is, maximize both of our times here. And if it's okay with you, would you walk me through the clinic as if I were a patient? And while you're doing that, we'll talk about it in the next slide. While you're doing that, you're going to start to talk about the implementation as you're doing that. Again, have the financial discussions in private. This usually is a good thing to have before you bring in the staff. It can happen after it, but sometimes this meeting might go a little bit longer than planned, especially if you get a lot of great questions. And remember, some questions might sound like objections, but usually an objection is really a question, and that question is, okay, how does this work for me? Or how does this work in our office? You're going to want to make sure that you discuss e-commerce options. We'll go over that tonight. And you're going to want to discuss the idea of creating a separate checking account to track the profit growth in the practice. So a theme is walking the clinic, because we have to customize our implementation to match what the clinic looks like, how it feels like. And like I said at the last training, every implementation is different, but every implementation is also very much the same. There's just going to be little details here and there, or the number of people doing the tasks of implementation will vary. But we will customize it to the process, and I think that's a really good thing to emphasize while if it's the office manager or a staff member, a front desk staff member, walking you through the clinic to go, okay, great, I see this would be a great place to have ID cards, or a great place to have our education support system. Now, is the check-in area the same as where patients check out? Don't be afraid. Communicate what's going on in your head in very simple, normal, conversational business words while you're doing it. Don't be weird, you guys. The theme of speed of the lead, I don't know that's going to come here actually in walking the clinic, but know as the NC that the office is the leader, the health professional, or whoever is going to be the key implementation person is the leader of this process. And what we're looking for is how to customize things to fit their existing flow. Okay, so let's talk about e-commerce options. The standard option, which the nutraMetrix portal comes with, it accepts Visa and MasterCard. And that's usually pretty adequate for most implementations. Now, when you have the standard e-commerce option, the retail profit from a purchase through the portal goes into a credit on account. This is a good thing, because profit can easily be tracked on the credit on account. You can either use that credit when you're making an inventory purchase, or you can just keep accruing it, and it's a great place for you to be able to show profit growth in the practice. Now, but with the standard e-commerce option, BV can only be placed by the order, and it can't be manipulated in any way. It can't be shared or split. It can only be when OPC3 moves 43.5 points, it's either the left or the right. You can't split it up. Now, when you have iTransact, you have a little more freedom. The portal accepts more than just Visa and MasterCard. Now, the retail profit from a purchase on the portal goes into the bank account, and the card that's holding the iTransact account open is charged. So there's it's a little more comprehensive. But the flip side to that is BV can be divided up and it can be placed strategically. Now, if you don't have iTransact, as an NC, I have to insist that you get iTransact. because you have to be able to communicate it effectively on what the differences are. And if you have, again, just like any of our products, you have to have an experience with it. You have to know how it works. And I'll be honest with you, it took me, the world of merchant services is not my first language, and it took me a little while to understand what was going on with my bank account and all that stuff with iTransact. So I'm going to insist that every NC who chooses to work with health professionals, that if you don't already have iTransact, you do it now. There's so many benefits to it anyway for your personal business. I think it's a little bit foolish not to have it, but it's essential as a business consultant with nutraMetrix to have iTransact, in my opinion. Now, why would it be important to have a separate bank checking account? Well, just like with the standard option, when the retail profit is in the credit on account, when you have iTransact, if you have everything going into one checking account, then it can easily be tracked. If the profit from nutraMetrix is going into their standard checking account or their standard business account, where other expenses are being spent, then it's really hard to be able to say, no, we made $1,400 this month in your third month or whatever it is, because they're not seeing it accrue. So it can help them track their growth. Now, some health professionals might not have a Visa or MasterCard because they're using an American Express card for their business. So setting up this separate account and then getting a debit card that's Visa or MasterCard associated with the account is going to really simplify this whole issue of I only have American Express. So that's another huge reason for it. Now, this isn't necessary, but it is strongly recommended. And guess what? Wouldn't it be a good idea for all of us to do that too? That way we can always track our profit growth from our business. Because just like we tell our health professionals they have a revenue-generating wellness program, every NC has a revenue-generating business. Okay, so let's actually go into conducting the implementation meeting. And it is in your NC implementation workbook. I recommend that you have NC workbook for yourself and that you have the appropriate pages of the NC workbook for every account that you do have. And I want to encourage everyone to practice it with anyone. It doesn't have to be an NC, but practice it on anyone. Just don't make your first health professional the first time that you picked up this piece of paper. Now, don't be intimidated by the implementation meeting. It's 3 pages long, and I think that can look a little intimidating. I'm going to go through this kind of in real time. I'm going to probably do the whole thing. I may change my mind as we go through, but you're going to see that I'm pretty much just reading it. I might throw in my own little read-ism, and I encourage you, if it's professional, to throw in your own whoever you are-ism, so that it doesn't feel like you're reading. But again, I'm also going to go through this, and any information that I know or I'm pretty certain of, I'm going to already have written it in. So if I had already asked them there, I did it. Instead of asking them, I'm going to confirm that it's still accurate. So I'll put, whoever it was that attended up at the top, the dating, the meeting date. And, I'm not going to say the theme is mission, vision, to destination, but that's how I know. Remember, owning a theme isn't about memorizing anything. It's about being able to speak about it from your own authenticity, or just speak about it how it's written on the page, which is what I'm going to do. So you're sitting down with the health professional, with perhaps a couple key office players, and you might say, listen, the goal of discussing and identifying a mission and vision for your office has a couple goals. The first is to ensure that we, as your consultant, know what you want for your office moving forward and in the future, and that we can fully tailor our implementation assistance to support your practice goals. So let me ask you this. When you look ahead, when you look forward 5 or 10 years in your practice, and you can look back and say, I did it, and everything is as you want them to be. What was it that you achieved? What does that look like? Great, and then you write down the answer. Okay, so what sets you apart from other practices of the same specialty in the area? And let them answer, and listen, and write it down. You don't need to comment on it. You just need to listen and write it down. Okay, great. So secondly, we understand that your staff is very busy. And remember, we're always going to remind them that we know this. And that while we are implementing a very streamlined, easy system, they need to understand why the office is making changes and where the practice is going, so they understand why their support is essential to your success. How do you want your staff to describe you or your services or your practice? And write down the answer. Okay, great. Now, the fact that you have a wellness solution and provide advanced support for patients, this separates you from your competition. And identifying your advanced patient support will help attract new patients that are looking for wellness care. So we might want to form a vision statement that clearly says who you are and what makes your practice unique. Then the staff, when they're answering the phones to potential new patients, they can include that vision in conveying what you do here in the practice and what your practice is about. Do you have any thoughts on how you'd like to position that? And then you write it down. And you might, when you go home, start creating a couple different drafts of a vision statement for them. All right, so I want to move on to another topic. We recognize that any program in your office must generate revenue to be worth your time and focus. And our goal is to implement a revenue generating solution that meets the needs of both you and your patients in the practice. Now, when we spoke at the first time, you mentioned that you would like to see a wellness program generating X amount of dollars. Is that still correct? Okay. And how much money would you like to be generating, say, 5 years from now? Okay, great. Okay. And you might comment on how, okay, that's actually pretty doable, depending on how fast or hard we work. Or you might say, that is doable. It may not be doable in the first year. It might not be doable in 5 years. But we can talk about that, and we can brainstorm on some ways to get you where you want to be, because we do have many options with nutraMetrix. All right, so see what I did there? I sort of brought on the theme of expanding distribution without even talking about expanding distribution. I just mentioned there are ways that we can go about it. And then if they ask, I will probably not bring it up here, but I'll let them know that maybe at our next meeting or at the end of this meeting, we can talk about what that could look like. Okay, so I want to talk about a couple business themes. Doctor, I'm sure you're familiar with the 80% rule. Every business has a 80% rule. It refers to a marketing concept of addressing the primary needs of or in your case, a practice and a patient base first. And this is the first focus of our first phase of implementation. Now, I probably will have already written down what we've talked about as far as products and services for the phases, because the majority of that gets decided usually in the proposal meeting that we've had before. So, but if it hasn't, we'll go over it, or I'll confirm what we have, or what we need for the practice. Thank you, Doctor. Now, if you've already gone and walked through the office, you won't need to ask them, excuse me, to describe the flow of the process. You could even say, so, well, before our meeting started, I actually had the chance to walk with Linda through the office. I asked her to take me on a tour as if I were a patient, so I understand a little bit more about how your office works. So the next thing is, again, we understand your practice is extremely busy, and efficiency is mandatory. So with small, simple tasks in place among the different roles inside the practice, we can support your revenue-generating program with customized efficiency. Who is it that takes in intake information or wellness information from patients? Again, intake information and wellness intake might be two different people depending on the office. Okay. And some of these I'm not going to say I'm going to have to ask them who's going to register a staff ID. I'm going to, figure that out as we go along. Who in the office is the health professional who recommends care for patients, if there is somebody, or if it's a large office and there are many health professionals. So you're going to go through this, Doctor, who do you see that would be the best person to oversee the program in general here in the office? They might place orders for the office, help manage inventory, maybe even manage billing. Great. So, and you're going to write that name or those names down. So you see here, I'm almost reading this verbatim. Okay, so to support the success of your program, we have various support materials that we recommend to help educate your staff, help educate patients, and help ensure an efficient and successful implementation. Here's some items and how we might use them. We have exam room posters. We have portal ID. Well, I do portal ID cards. I actually buy the first set for my offices, so I'm not going to let that be an option. And patient product guide pages are usually a must for me anyway. And just so you guys know, I usually buy the first set of things for the office, like ID cards, like the wellness education program, and I let them know I'm buying the first set for them. As my gift to you in the office, I want to make sure that you have all the tools necessary, and I went ahead and I bought the first set of these for you. Okay. Are there any other items that you feel to help support your success? They may, depending on their experience with other companies or other offices, know they need other things. We may, like let's say TLS or weight management is important, so we might want to offer the weight loss posters that we have, as well as just the regular nutraMetrix body posters. Excuse me. Okay, great. So we found that in many, this is the conversation that you're going to have in private. So this might come before everything else, right? So we found in many offices, staff members are busy and they can sometimes resist additional tasks. Again, I am telling them what I know the objections already are. We also know they tend to not only want annual raises, but they expect them. Acknowledging that this is a revenue-generating program, many offices choose to provide incentives to key staff members to help retain good employees while motivating them towards the success of your program. Incentives can be customized in any manner that suits your needs. Do you wish to offer incentives to your staff members? Okay, great. And then incentive programs is probably a whole other coring. Generally, what usually works is a percentage of the retail profit that is split usually evenly among the staff members that are supporting the program. That's the best general way to look at an incentive program. Okay, great. In the initial implementation phase, so you see what I'm doing? I'm just reading this. I would actually rather take some more time tonight to get through your questions, but I want you to understand that this is a really simple process. The way that this was created, I mean, I've said this before, and I even said this at our last training. If you can read English off of a piece of paper, you can be a nutraMetrix consultant. Okay, so here we go, business account options. Now, I'm not going to say for single or married practitioners, blah, 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 and I'm not going to ask them, do you want to put it in your EIN or personal social security number? Well, there might be a few cases that I do ask that directly, but I'm going to then explain what the benefits are of each. So I'm going to let them know that we have two types of accounts for our health professionals. Our simple introductory account, we call it the HP1, Health Professional 1 program. It's a very easy solution that fits most of our offices and practitioners. We do recommend that as a starting point for almost everyone that we work with. And we also do have an upgraded account that provides more advanced growth support, and you can upgrade it at any time. So what we have to decide now is, are we going to put the account in the EIN number of the practice or in your personal social security number? Now, the difference, doctor, is if we put it in the EIN, because we're going to be building a revenue stream, and as we go along, it's going to actually be a passive and a residual income stream, and I want you to know that, doctor. If we put it in your EIN, then if you choose at any point, when you sell your practice, then that revenue stream will go with the practice, which could be a very healthy asset to sell your business with. If you put it in your personal social security number, then that income stream will go with you after you've sold your practice and after you retire. So that's the difference. We can change it at any time. I usually suggest, when it's appropriate, that health professionals put it in their social security number. Now, if it's a large facility, that might be a different thing. I primarily work with private practice doctors personally, and that's usually the case. I can give you an example of where it wasn't the case. A practice I work with is owned by, co-owned by two family members, and they decided to put it in the EIN number of the practice. Again, it can be changed at any time, but one of those doctors will be retiring much earlier than the other one because of the age difference. Okay, so for a larger practice, we might ask them if they want one account for the entire practice or one for each separate health professional. I want to encourage you, especially if it's the beginning, don't necessarily go for the big fish. Start with the small and hungry practices, and get a couple implementations under your belt before you do this. So every implementation is unique. And we're able to work with each healthcare facility to match the unique needs of each system. Can you think of any obstacles we'll come across that we can discuss and prevent now? And then wait for their answer. Don't sweep anything under the rug. I will often say, I don't believe in sweeping anything under the rug. It means we're going to trip on it later. And this is for the staff too, this question. And remember, objections are usually a question translated to, how does this work for me? What's in this for me? Or how does this work in our practice? Okay, great. Is there any other information that you may need or concerns that you'd like to address? Okay, great. Then the next step is to schedule the target dates for implementation. Okay, it's so simple. So don't skip it. So what the implementation meeting yields is it's finalizing the type or size of implementation, and I'll go over that in just a bit. It usually ends in gathering account registration or setup information. It doesn't always, okay? Sometimes it's like, okay, this is great. The staff may have more objections than you thought, and now the health professional might be having some doubts, and that's what those last important questions are about, so that you can answer them. Every once in a while, this is just to say, you know what, this sounds really great. I need to discuss this more with my staff. I need to make sure that they're on board before we go ahead and do this. And I would say, doctor, I couldn't agree with you more. The worst thing that we could do is get things going and then find out that there's something going on with the staff that's impeding your vision for your practice. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to suggest that I follow up with you next week or the end of the week, whatever that is. Which day next week would be the best time to reach you? Or which day next week would be the best time for me to stop by and find out where things are? And get the day and the time. Again, who should I schedule that with? I'd actually like to sit down with you for a few minutes and address any additional concerns. And doctor, if you decide that you don't want to move forward, that's also fine too. I just want to make sure that if that is the case, that you're making that decision for the right reasons and have the correct information around that. Doctor, wouldn't you agree that that would be the best way to proceed? Or something like that. Oh. Excuse me. Just so you know, that was a DNA Miracles product that just jumped off my shelf. All right. In fact, I have to take it to my networking meeting tomorrow, so I'm glad I did, because where it was, I wouldn't have remembered. All right. Okay. What this also may yield are potential type 2 NCs emerging from the staff, and you might start identifying who they might be by the questions that they ask. I had an office manager in a practice as we were going through this, and we did talk a little bit about products when we were finalizing the products in this course of the conversation. And she said, well, she kind of raised her hand and she goes, well, shouldn't we all be taking these products? And I was like, you couldn't take the smile off my face when that happened. Okay, and the most important thing of what the implementation meeting yields is that we all begin to move forward together. That's the most important part. Again, it's not about identifying a potential type 2 NC. It's about moving forward together. We're now all more or less on the same page. Okay, so let's talk about the different sizes of implementation. Again, because we have, small, medium, and large for patients when it comes to product support, but we have different size implementations. So a small implementation is for a doctor that sees the value in this. Now, if the doctor doesn't see the value in a wellness program, but just wants this to make money, it hasn't been my personal experience that works very well, because patient care really isn't their first concern. So, but for a health professional who is interested and does see the value, but is very busy, a small implementation can be little to no inventory. And when patients ask questions, and again, we're going to teach them how to get them to ask these questions in the implementation process and the education process, when they say, well, which brand do you recommend, or how do you recommend I do this, then all the doctor really needs to say is this one. Doctor, which multivitamin or which omega-3 do you recommend? This one. And then hand them a sheet of paper or hand them a nutraMetrix ID card with things on the back that you could check off. A medium implementation is a health professional who will carry basic general nutrition support. This might be a daily essentials implementation that's focused just around providing core general nutrition support, or optimal. You might focus it around the optimal health kit, or one of the kits that makes it very simple to provide them with individual products, or the whole kit and caboodle. And a large implementation is a health professional who's doing integrative support and integrative wellness, and wants to supply a wider array of that support, and they're going to use our direct system support. Now, I want you guys to always have the mindset of DSS, that DSS is the smallest amount of products for the largest impact. So don't get carried away on small, medium, large when you're talking about product support as cost, because if we're not able to help the health professional help their patients, then we're not doing a good job, and nutraMetrix is not making a good name for itself. So wouldn't you agree, I'm asking you guys who are listening to this, that if somebody's dealing with an issue, that for 1 or 2 or 3 months, with a conversation and education to support it, that spending, say, a little bit more than might be in their quote-unquote budget for wellness, but it's going to get them feeling better, and then they could be maybe weaned off to a smaller maintenance support regimen? Wouldn't you agree that that would be more effective than selling a small cost, one single product of something that may not support what they're looking for because it's just not enough, or it's not over enough time, because nutraceutical and nutritional interventions work differently than pharmaceutical interventions? That's what DSS is. So I want to encourage you to have the DSS mindset for every kind of implementation and every kind of proposal meeting that you are putting together, okay? Now, the account setup, it can happen at any time. It's usually going to happen after this process. It might happen before this process. It might happen after a couple follow-ups. Again, the setup, the registration is not the end goal. It's simply the beginning of where your work really begins, you guys. So you might say something like, okay, we have everything that we need to get started on your implementation. Once we have your account in this system, we can get the supplies here, set up your website, and get going. Here's the information we need to set you up, and provide them with the account setup form, which is in your NC implementation workbook. Again, all the forms that you need are in that workbook, which is why you should have a copy for each account that you have. Now, what not to do, and we'll end here. Don't be intimidated by this step. How will you not be intimidated? Become familiar with these 3 pages. Become familiar with the themes. And whatever your personal objections or fears may be, I need to insist that you overcome them. And you're going to overcome them by doing things. You're not going to overcome them necessarily by thinking about or wanting to or really, really wishing to overcome them. If you have sales objections, if you have objections about the cost, if you have objections about ingredients, if you just have fears around putting a doctor on a pedestal that you're not in the same sphere of each other, then you have to do things to overcome them. And sometimes just doing, putting the next step in front of you and going through this process is the learning process. It is the learning curve. So, like Nike says, just do it. It's a great theme for life. Don't skip this step. Do not skip this step. Even if after the proposal meeting, the health professional says, all right, I am ready to get going. Let's do this. Then I would say, great, doctor, I'm very excited. This is great. There's one more step in the process before we open your account. And that's to ensure that I understand how your practice works, the flow of your practice, that we make sure that we identify some key players in the office, and that we make sure your staff is on board with your wellness vision first. And then, 9 times out of 10, that's never an issue. And then don't register the account at the office, you guys. I know in our regular unfranchised business, it's a system of duplication, and we are taught to educate them as we're going through the process. That is totally correct, but not with nutraMetrix. Originally, the back office was very glitchy. It's not glitchy so much anymore, but this is just something that should not be done with them in case it is glitchy. Or time-consuming. We just gather the information and then take it home or to our office, wherever it is that we work from, and then and register the account. Now, you're going to communicate with the office manager and whoever it is that you are deciding that the email address for the account, because if it's the doctor's personal account, then you need to have this conversation with the doctor, or email address, I mean. If it's the info@drsmith.com, then you need to communicate with the office manager or whoever it is that is the person receiving those emails, okay? So communicate with that person that they'll be receiving a confirmation email of a successful registration, and to please forward it to you when it arrives. Because what we're going to do is we're going to set up their nutraMetrix portal. We're going to do the BV placement. We're going to go through that wizard for them, and then we will begin to train the staff. We'll set up the staff login ID as well, most likely with that same email address if it's not the doctor's email address. And all you need to say is, great, I have all the information and we need to set up your account. You'll be receiving a confirmation email, and I need you to forward that to me when it arrives. Right? Not would you please, I need you to forward to me that arrives. When you do, I can set up your nutraMetrix portal. I can take care of some basic administrative back office needs. Listen, I know how busy you are, so I will call the office as soon as I know it should have arrived to just make things a little more simple on your end. And then you might tell them, listen, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'll be opening, I won't actually be home till 7 tonight. You might have a busy day. So I'll be registering the account tonight, which means it'll arrive sometime between then and tomorrow morning. So why don't I call the office at 10:30 tomorrow, or whatever it is. So you see where I'm going with that. All right, so that is the why, the how, and the what of conducting the implementation meeting. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording and we'll take some questions.